listening to The Starting Zone, a podcast about World of Warcraft and the people who play it. And now, here are your hosts.
Well, hello and welcome to The Starting Zone, the podcast about World of Warcraft, people who play it. Today is May 31st, 2022, and my name is Spencer Downey. Thank you so much for listening and subscribing to the podcast. I'm joined today, as always, by my co-host, Jason Lucas. Jason, how are you doing on this fine Tuesday?
Spencer, hello. Good afternoon to you. I'm doing well. It's a very exciting day around here, of course. We have not played any World of Warcraft today as we record this, because today is 9.2.5 launch day.
Yeah, we're 5 hours out from the window of it coming back up.
Hopefully, less. Hopefully not more, but maybe more. I mean, this patch has the potential to break the very fabric of the video game. So, they need to take as much time. Do. Yeah, but this one I think even more fundamentally with cross-faction instances.
Yeah.
Yep. Let it. It's going to take however long it takes, and I wouldn't be surprised if WoW was a bit of a rocky ride this week as stuff gets ironed out with that. But I mean, when we were talking last week, I believe on last week's show we mentioned that a release candidate build had gone out like late Monday onto PTR, and so we knew it was coming soon, but maybe not next week. But sometimes release candidates stay up for 2 resets or something. But a couple days later, they just announced that it was going to ship today. So it's on its way in NA, and I imagine with weekly resets in other regions. So. Very cool. Yeah, this is, I would say, we'll get into the particulars obviously throughout the show, but if you have been maybe on the fence about really investing any time into Shadowlands, or you haven't really played it yet, but you listen to the show to see what's going on and you're just kind of waiting, like, this is the time to jump back in. This is essentially Shadowlands' final form, right? This is the smoothest, lowest friction experience you're going to have with this expansion, the most flexible experience, the most content, the most access to power. So, it's going to be a great time to get in there and do whatever you want to do. Level up a new character, get some new powers and gear, and skill up new professions. And anything you need to do, it's all there. You can do it without having to really wait for a month or so worth of rotations on certain things, or wait for, to grind out a ton of mats so that you can skill up your professions or anything like that. Everything is just more wide open. Switching covenants is going to be easier if you haven't done it so far, to like max out different covenants. Like all of the stuff, all the promise of Shadowlands, all the stuff that was, theoretically cool about it at the outset is now going to be really accessible and flexible for the rest of this expansion's lifespan. So, that's a good thing. That's what we've been waiting for. So if you've been just kind of raid logging, or you really haven't been playing at all, but you're getting a little itchy, like, this patch is the time to really get in there and see what Shadowlands has to offer you.
Yeah, no, 100%. And as you sort of said, we're not just getting cross-faction today. They decided to bundle a whole bunch of other things in there. So there's going to be so much stuff to chat about, not just on today's show, but over the coming weeks, as we get to dive in and experience this content and the changes to it. We got raid tuning, we got, PvP and class changes, we got class changes in general, we got all sorts of stuff that is coming out with 9.2.5 on top of the systems that we've talked about on previous episodes. So, before we dive into it, Jason, is there anything you wanted to mention about this past week in World of Warcraft for you?
Yeah, it was a pretty light week for me overall with the holiday in the US and everything. We cut a raid night since it was Memorial Day weekend here, and I had other stuff going on Sunday night, and I didn't want to ask people to show up in my absence or whatever. So we only got 2 raid nights in, and no prog. We didn't even step back into Mythic. We died so much on reclears. Like, the Anduin wipes are just completely killing morale. And it's ridiculous, because it's really not a hard fight. It's just a matter of focus. We have the numbers to do it. It's just early deaths or weird, like, high-risk maneuvers in second intermission that result in deaths. It just, none of it makes any sense. So, I think where we're at now, we cleared back through to Jailer. I think we're just going to leave the heroic ID at Jailer. We don't really need reclears for gear. There's very little benefit to killing these bosses over and over again for gear when a lot of our core raiders are geared up from Mythic Plus and other sources. We need Jailer pulls. I think we pulled Jailer like I don't know, maybe 3 times before the end of Wednesday night. So it's not like we really got any good learning in on that fight.
Right.
And, now we'll talk about some nerfs and stuff to Sepulchre, which I think are going to ease this pain over the next few months. But while we're still working on Prague, spending an entire night dying on the attempt to re-clear Heroic Anduin is just not a good use of anybody's time or emotional energy. So I think this week the plan is going to be, let's hop into Mythic. Let's see if we can knock over Mythic Skolix. I mean, we had a 3% wipe with a suboptimal team a couple weeks ago. So,
right.
That should be doable. And then we'll just, slam Jailer until we're through there, and then we'll figure out what we're going to do. So that was pretty much Raid. Ultimately kind of disappointing and frustrating, but just a moment of clarity of like, I have to stop doing this for now. Like, we need to be focusing our energy on Prague, and the fact that we can't focus up and kill Anduin in 1 or 2 pulls a week. The answer is not to just keep fighting against that and hoping we have enough time left over.
Right.
So that's just what we need to do for now. Mythic Plus, I didn't get a lot of keys, but it was also really not a very good week. It was the first combo that we saw at the beginning of the season, and it felt really hard the first week of the season, obviously. It's still not a great combo. Honestly, I did get some rating in. I got up to 2937. I think Sanguine Depths is off my list now. I don't think I ever have to go back in there. I'm over 300 rating in there. So. It's nice. I think I have like 4 dungeons that I don't have to do to try to get to 3K now. That they're either like 299 or 300 plus. So that's cool. Just narrowing that pool down a little bit.
Yeah, it also means you don't have to have 20s and everything. You just have to have the 19s or whatever is actually a much easier thing to accomplish. It does make a difference.
Yeah, as long as you can get over 300 in a dungeon, it doesn't really matter, how you put those together.
Yeah.
But I didn't do like 8 keys or anything last week. I think I only got 4 in, maybe not even that many, but still, it's just getting there little by little. And now it's the thing of like, I really need the Keystone luck to line up. I need the particular stones that get me the rating on the Fort or Tyrannical week in order to get over the hump there. So got to keep an eye on that, but at least I don't have to slam the other side over and over again anymore. So that frees it up a little bit. And other than that, working on the alts and getting some gear there. I finished off 4-piece on the Mage, so that was awesome and really quick. It helps when the world boss drops stuff that you can convert via the Catalyst. And I got the Hunter up to 2-piece. Oh. So I got a bit more work to do on the Hunter because you can't get any slots from the world boss that you can convert to set bonus. So it's all relics all the time, and my Hunter's pretty low geared. It's not like the Hunter had a lot of time in there getting ciphers to get higher level cipher gear, right? So he's just catching up all over the place. It's going to be probably another 2 weeks before I can knock out all of 4-piece on the Hunter. But it's pretty fun to just be able to be like, okay, I'm going to take this tune into the zone. I'm going to check off these activities for the day, and then I can reliably get this much power in this time frame. Like, it just feels so good. It's been really fun messing with those characters. So once Hunter's totally done with that, then I think I'll be done for a while. I got other stuff I want to do, especially with the patch coming in. So I don't know that if I'm done with alts and other tunes and stuff in this expansion. That seems like a bridge too far for me to say right now, but my immediate goals are almost, finished off with these guys in terms of gearing, and then I just want to do the Covenant campaigns and get all those appearances and stuff unlocked.
Yeah, that's where my goal currently is, right? Is just getting all the appearances and all the achievements done for all the events with the Covenant stuff. So that's sort of where my focus is, outside of trying to kill Mythic Jailer, which is ongoing.
Right.
We have gotten him to 31% inside phase 3, so we're getting there. It's actually the most interesting thing I find about Prague, especially Prague that lasts a long time on bosses, is like I still remember it was like a week and a half ago when we were pulling the boss and wiping in like the first minute or like 40 seconds of this fight, right? Like the fight would start. We'd get 30 or 40 seconds and we'd wipe. We're now getting past the 7-minute mark. We're at 7 minutes and 30 seconds in. It's like a 12-minute fight. So we're hitting that point where you're like, oh, wow, like we've actually managed to learn the dance with 20 people appropriately on how to do it in this challenging encounter. enough that we're now making it 7 and something minutes in, and you just keep trying until you get the next step. And so like yesterday when we were in there, there's a particular aspect at the very beginning of phase 3 where there's a really difficult overlap where you're soaking a frontal from Jailer while you're doing the heal to heal Azeroth to keep it alive, while someone's breaking chains, which does a whole bunch of damage to the raid. And you essentially do that overlap. We actually were able to survive that first one and move to the second time you do that. And you actually drop your first puddle of defile, which is the other thing that happens in that phase. And we're able to do that and move to the next spot, which is sort of like, okay, we've now accomplished the next basically checkpoint of where we've reached we've now hit the point where we now start to learn something new, because now after you gate, we have to spread out in a very particular pattern, sort of like Olympic rings, overlapping circles with our torments to make sure we don't basically just fill up the entire space of torments and wipe the raid. Instead, we sort of all stack on top of each other and then all move to an opening together. And that way we do take an initial hit that's a heavier hit, but we are safe from the actual explosion, because on Mythic, torments leave behind a swirly that explodes after you've actually had the initial torment go off. And so we're now learning that aspect of the fight, and I think we'll probably have to do that 2 more times, and then we will be into moving into the final phase of the fight, which is going to be pretty exciting. So we're getting there. Nice. There are Jailer tuning things that happen that we'll talk about later in the show that happened today, and so we'll chat about that later in the show and what that might mean for Prog and how that sort of feels for raiders who are, 240 pulls into a boss. I think we're 239 or something now, so it's always weird when changes come in this late and how it might change what you've been doing up to this point. So yeah, all right, with that, let's jump into what's going on this week in World of Warcraft. All right, this week in Warcraft is the World Quest bonus event, which means the Sign of the Emissary buff is up, where reputation gains from World Quests are increased by 50%, and there's a quest to complete 20 World Quests, which rewards 500 rep to the Covenant of your choice. It's not just Covenant, there's actually some other factions in there too, as well as 750 Anima. So this is just an easy one to just pick up right off the bat inside Ouroboros while you're opening up your vault. Pick up this quest, it's right next to it. And that way, throughout the week, if you happen to do any world quests, if you're just doing your callings or whatever it is, you will passively complete this and get a bunch of bonus rep and anima. It's fantastic. As much as it's not very exciting, it's a great event because everyone benefits from it.
Yeah, and they the last time this was up, it didn't work properly in Zereth Mortis for the first couple days, which meant that you could not do this with the 3 Zereth Mortis dailies, in its entirety before it went away, right? Like after the hotfix came in, there weren't 20 world quests left in Zereth Mortis before the end of that week. So,
yeah,
if you're still doing Zereth Mortis on a regular basis, this is just free, right? If you just go do that, you'll have this done by the end of the week. If you need something in particular, obviously this is pretty quick to knock out. So, yeah, it's not the most exciting thing in the universe, but it's a nice little bonus on top of stuff you already might be doing. Plus, we got Darkmoon Faire starting up towards the end of this week on Sunday. So if you need a particular rep, you can kind of focus out a little bit, as you got a little window there where you can get World Quest going, you can get Darkmoon Faire going, you can get the rep tokens for doing the weekly. Yeah, it's like you said, it's not it's not like earth-shatteringly exciting, but it is happening this week. Don't forget to pick it up, because you probably just complete it by accident.
Exactly. And along with that, you want to pick up the New Deal quest, which you can only grab when you're in war mode for Ouroboros. So you have to turn on war mode and then pick that up over by the PvP area. And of course, the Patterns Within Patterns quest in Zereth Mortis, where you can pick that up. And then while you're doing all your Zereth Mortis stuff, completing your weekly event at the same time as completing your weekly World Quest bonus event at the same time as completing a New Deal. I love it when things overlap like this. It feels so good. It's such a big benefit. You'll get huge rewards out of that. So I know, like, just doing the Patterns Within Patterns quest is like 1,200 anima on its own, just doing that quest. So if you want to get essentially like 2,500 anima for the week, because you're going to kill the world boss in there, you can just do the combo I just mentioned, and you'll essentially get 2,500 anima just right off the bat there, which is going to feel really good. So for people like myself trying to get all those rewards, I need hundreds of thousands of anima. That is just how this works.
Yeah. I mean, the bottom line here is get extra quest progress and rewards for doing the same amount of stuff. Just turn all the quests on and then go do stuff. And then you do less stuff but get more rewards. And that's what you want to do.
Yeah. And as we sort of dive into the world bosses for the week, this is a reminder that it's not till Season 4 actually launches, which isn't today, that the world bosses get an update. So Ranamanos, the Ever-Branching, is up. He's still dropping 200 eye-level conduits and 207 eye-level gear. There is no rotation where that's becoming relevant yet. That's going to be Season 4, so keep that in mind. But does drop certain memories, which will save you some resources on a character if you're trying to actually get all the memories or just trying to get specific ones. Jason, which memories does Ranamanos drop?
So for Ranamanos, you got Fevered Incantation for mages, Surging Shots for hunters, and Verdant Infusion for druids. And as I always like to say, even if you don't need these because you don't want to make these legendaries, if you do have ones that maybe you need to buy from one of the vendors that sells the random memory thing, like these are guaranteed sources of these, and they then come out of the pool of stuff you don't know. So, it's if you're switching up covenants or something this week because you get the Renown 60 item or whatever, this is quick anima, and you can use that for your new friends, and then maybe you get a memory you don't have, and that just makes your life easier.
Yeah, definitely. As far as Morgeth, the Tormentor of the Damned, goes, still dropping the 233 level gear. And then Antros, the big old Guardian construct in Zereth Mortis, is dropping your 259 level gear. So still something very worthwhile to do. Also worth 20% towards the Patterns Within Patterns quest. Kill him every week because you not only get the anima for it, you get that Patterns Within Patterns completion. So certainly worth doing. All right, Mythic Plus affixes for this week. Since we talked a bit about last week's at the top of the show, this week is Fortified, Bursting, and Storming, meaning non-boss enemies inflict more damage and have more health, so all the trash is going to hit harder and be a little tankier. When slain, the trash, the non-boss enemies, cause all players to suffer damage over time for 4 seconds, and this affects stacks. Obviously, that's bursting, meaning that people will basically get a stacking debuff every time a mob dies. So just keep that in mind. And then Storming, where while in combat, enemies periodically summon damaging whirlwinds. And these are the whirlwinds you have to dodge, otherwise you get knocked up into the air, which can feel really bad if you get knocked up into the air during a mechanic that you're supposed to be dodging. So hopefully that doesn't happen to you too much. But overall, this week is a bit of a sloggy trash week. That's what we come down to. The only nice thing about this that I like is that Fortified means that because mobs have more health, the really easy to kill mobs, like the slimes at the start of Plaguefall, have more health, which means they aren't just going to fall over and explode as quickly when people drop their big AoE spells. It gives you more time to single target focus down the really high health mob, or single target focus down other specific mobs, which means bursting can be a little bit easier to deal with Fortified weeks, because it means that you're not going to get a ton of stacks if you're not killing everything at the same time. When you go in and start killing those slimes and bursting stacks start going out, you have to be able to hold DPS and go, okay, we've gotten 5 stacks of bursting, 6 stacks of bursting. Let's hold DPS. Let's not kill another one and refresh this, because it will just keep refreshing it and you'll wipe your whole group. And when things have a little bit more health and a little bit tankier, it's easier to make that call. You can see it coming. You can see it happening a little bit easier, and it just comes in a bit slower. So you're able to sort of, make those calls sooner. I know a lot of people who run weak auras that basically spam over their head how many stacks they have and to stop DPS and things like that. I actually don't mind those, because it always is nice to remind people that this is a mechanic that sucks to have to deal with. Jason, what do you recommend for this week?
Yeah, I mean, I guess one thing to point out is that bursting is dispellable.
Yep.
So if somebody's really in dire straits, or you have like you get into a bad situation, you got like a priest, maybe you can mass. So that's nice. That adds some nice counterplay. Storming, I think, since they changed it up a while back, it's fine. It's a bit obnoxious, but as a tank, I usually will attempt to eat these on purpose and just keep them away from the rest of the group. And, sometimes if I get knocked back far enough, it sets me up for an easy charge to get back in, which gives me some rage and pops my legendary and all that. So that's not too bad. Overall, I think this is okay. You're not really punished super hard for pulling big this week for a fort week, which is good because, you can do those double and triple pulls where it makes sense, as long as you're keeping an eye on bursting, as long as, people aren't getting stupid with storming and causing bigger problems, like getting knocked into other trash or off of platforms or something.
Yeah.
If you're careful with your positioning, you can pull big, which is huge in a fort week because then you can make up a bunch of time. You can get a bunch of big AoE out on the high health packs, and then the bosses are going to melt. Bursting is not a concern when you're fighting a boss. Storming will still happen, and it can be problematic. Like there are bosses, Sanguine Depths, for example, where getting displaced at the wrong time can be fatal or at least like extremely punishing. So you have to be aware of that being the case, but with most bosses, you're in combat with an enemy, and so you will have a damaging whirlwind. And, if you have like a tank, for example, eat it and just get repositioned quickly, then that's probably okay. Fort weeks I think at this point in the expansion's lifespan and where we're at with our power levels this season, I think fort weeks just feel easier in general because trash is trash and it dies, and we have so many different specs and builds that have ridiculous AoE potential, and you can kill the trash and then you have a boss that's not particularly threatening at the end of it, and it's nice, especially at higher keys. I feel like fort it feels better, it feels more doable most weeks, and I don't think this is a particularly bad combo for a fort week. You do have to pay attention to bursting. Like if you ignore bursting, it will kill you.
Yeah.
You can't. You have to plan appropriately. You have to communicate. If you have a bad situation, you need to use a mass dispel or use personals or whatever. Have a plan. Call something out. Right. If you're hitting like 8 stacks, or if you've had the debuff for, I don't know, 28 consecutive seconds or something, maybe talk to your team about what to do. But other than that, if you watch a debuff and you play smart, you can pull big, but as long as you play smart, I think this is a great fort week to get some rating. So I got to figure out which keys I need rating from on fort and hope that they turn up among my group because, I just want to. I'm ready to get to the point with Mythic Plus where I don't care what we're doing, like we're just running because all of my goals and needs have been met. I'm almost there, so that's what I want.
Yeah, it's. If you still have goals for this week, the nicest thing about 4 weeks is bosses just fall over. And so sometimes the hardest mechanics to do in the game when it comes to Mythic Plus are negated, or you skip them, or you miss the really, soft and rage phase because the boss just dies quickly, which is really nice. So I enjoy that about 4 week. What I don't enjoy is it makes it more difficult to do some really cool trash pulls. On a week like this. Like last week, we were doing Aspires, and we did all 3 of those Angel mini bosses on the last platform before the last boss at the same time. We pulled all 3, got them all down to sub 50k hit points, killed them all at the same time. Doing that on a fort week is way more extreme to try and deal with because they have so much more health. They hit so much harder that you do really have to have different strategies between fort week and tyrannical week. And so there are some fun things you can't do on tyrannical weeks, and there's some fun things you can't do on fort weeks, and that's one of the fun things you can't do on a fort week. So, or at least it's a lot more challenging to do. So, either way, we hope that this M Plus sort of recaps helped y'all out. All right, PvP Brawl. This week is South Shore versus Terran Mill. This is the World of Warcraft 10th anniversary event that they introduced a while back, which is a 40-on-40 deathmatch. Takes place in South Shore. And you will get the Something Different quest when you go into this, which winning the brawl gets you some conquest, marks of honor, and honor as a reward. But basically, this is you meet on a field of battle, you smash your 40 people against their 40 people. You hope that you manage to push them back to their base. They'll then recoup and push you back to your base, and it goes back and forth until all of the reinforcements are sort of dwindled away. And Death Knights, this is your time to shine. This is the ultimate Death Knight brawl that you can have. Being able to grip healers or strong range DPS from their front line or their back line into your front line and just killing them all is amazing to be able to do. So just keep gripping in people. Your whole team will turn, they'll kill that one person, and you will start to have a overwhelming advantage. So feel free to queue up Death Knights. You're going to have a really good time with this brawl.
Yeah, and grip their Death Knights.
Oh, yeah. Sure.
Even better.
Yeah.
This is... I love the fact that this lined up for the week that cross-faction instances get patched into the game. Yeah. It's perfect timing. I guess the question is, can you queue for a brawl with a cross-faction party? That would be interesting. But this one, like you said, there's not a lot of technique here. This is a really accurate recreation of old school, like pre-Battlegrounds PvP in WoW, where stuff would just break out on a map somewhere out in a zone, and people would be fighting for no discernible reason other than it was fun to see who would win. And yeah, this kind of feels like that. You don't really need to know a lot. Just stay with your group and hit your damage spells or your healing spells or whatever. It's pretty fun. It's usually pretty fast paced. So, and if you need achievements related to honorable kills or something, this is a great place to get them. There's going to be a lot of honorable kills popping off in this brawl all week. So, check it out.
Yeah, I wanted to touch on the the PvP stuff you talked about with cross-faction. I'm pretty sure that's not a thing. I think from the notes that I've been reading, they specifically wanted to keep the PvP stuff non-cross-faction grouping. So just keep that in mind. If you're like, hey, I got my 3 buddies together from the other faction and we were all trying to queue up for a battleground and we couldn't. Why couldn't we? It's not a thing at the moment.
They should let you do it in brawls though, because they're brawls. It would just be funny.
It's true. It'd be cool if they did in brawls.
And it'd be really great in this brawl. That would be way too funny.
It would. Okay, moving on from that, we have some Blue Post stuff we want to move into. But before we do, Darkmoon Faire, as Jason said, starts up this Sunday, the 5th of June, runs until the 11th of June, the day after my birthday. So I get to celebrate Darkmoon Faire during my birthday. Nice. It's going to be a good time.
The fair is in town just in time.
That's right. And apparently everyone likes to launch things on June 10th. It's 2 years in a row now where like movies come out, tons of stuff launches. It is a Friday this year, so that is nice and exciting. Last year it was a Thursday, so I don't quite understand why everything launched on it last year, but it did. We get to enjoy the weekend with some Darkmoon Faire. So be sure that you're picking up your buffs for your extra reputation, for your reputation and experience. I don't know why I experienced them mine, but yes, I'm apparently moving into my birthday week. I need some experience. And you can also get your Pet Battle tokens from there. You can get your dirigible, so you get all your Darkmoon Faire tokens towards your dirigible, do your races. They got like arcade there. They have the new dance thing there, the dance stuff that Jason's still using all the achievements for. Be sure that you're checking that out this week. Maybe when Jason's sort of winding down from his alt, he can get him over there and do some dance competition stuff. That'll be. Well, I
gotta get my hunter out there this week because my hunter is engineering.
Oh yeah,
and there's no good way to get those last 3 points of engineering skill, or 4 points maybe. There's no patterns left that are orange or even yellow by the time you get into like the mid 90s. So you got to just catch quests or do Darkmoon Faire. So yeah, I got to go do that when this starts up too.
And the other thing happening this week, it's happening on June 6th and it goes until the 8th, is probably the most underrated micro holiday for early expansion that anyone could possibly want. It's the 1,000 Boat Bash, where you head out to Thousand Needles, and there's a quest chain to acquire boat parts. And those boat parts can be used for the next 7 days in all zones. And the boat buff that you gain when you use this thing is you move at 330% speed along the surface of water. And as much as we're late expansion, and you're not going to notice it as much, in where we're at now, because everyone sort of has flying and they can fly around, it's easy to unlock. Early expansion, when there isn't flying in the game, this is amazing for some zones. Huge buff.
Yeah, this is one of my favorite micro holidays. The only bad thing about it, like most micro holidays, is that the stuff you do out there is based around quests. And once you've done them on a character, you do not redo the quest chain. And the quest chain is really cool. It's pirate themed. It's like goblins. I mean, it's Thousand Needles, right? So, it's like the flooded Thousand Needles from Post Cataclysm. You can kind of already get an idea of what the vibe is like out there. So you can't redo the quest chain. I think you just can go pick up your boat if you've already done it on a character.
Yeah.
The boats are all appropriate to your player character's race, right? It all looks like a boat that those people would make, which is really cool. And it's just straight up way faster than any other way to get around. The only thing about this that sucks is that it has like no utility in Shadowlands. There is almost no water in Shadowlands.
Yeah.
I don't know how this is going to work in Zereth Mortis. Like, probably not at all. And there's only a couple little ponds and stuff in Zereth Mortis anyway, so it's not really going to do you that much good. But like when this was in Legion, I would use this for that week in lieu of flying around. I would just go out to the coastline of every zone, and you would move so fast that it would be better than flying there in a straight line, because you'd get there and then you could just fly up a cliff or whatever. So. If you've never done it, you should check it out just because it's a fun quest line and the boats are cool and the buff is really great. Hopefully there'll be plenty of water in the Dragon Isles, and Thousand Boat Bash will return to its former glory.
That's the other motivating thing I would put out there is if you do it now, you get to experience Boat Bash when there isn't a ton else going on in the game. And it means that when Dragon Isles rolls around, if it is helpful and if it is up during a time when it's super helpful, you can just go pick up your boat. You don't have to do the quest chain. You just get to walk in there, pick up your boat, hop on your boat, and use it inside Dragon Isles, which will just take you a moment to do. So certainly worthwhile, checking out and doing for, either just the benefit of having the boat unlocked or for actually experiencing the quest chain. I really like the quest chain. You get to go diving, and it's very cool. I always loved the salt flats, which is what that used to be in Thousand Needles. There was like racing that took place on the salt flats. It was all kind of cool. And then, you're right. When Cataclysm happened, it all flooded. It's like flooded with like 80 feet of water. Like it's super deep in that area now. You get to go back, revisit that zone, see what's going on there. And if you're someone who plays Classic, you know what I mean when I talk about salt flats. So it's kind of neat to see the before and after with that zone of Cataclysm stuff. Okay. Blue posts about the 9.2.5 content update. So we have a few different topics. We have the content update itself. We have raid tuning that's happened. And we had class tuning and PvP adjustments that happened. And we're sort of going to work our way through those overall. So as far as this raid patch goes, there are now achievements in the game for all Covenant features. Basically, it's the ones that I've been working towards for a while. They just added a bunch of achievements, so be sure that you're checking out your achievements to see whether or not there's something new in there in the category that you're wanting to sort of complete or accomplish. If you're somebody who's looking to set goals, go through your achievement log, see what there might be in there that might be fun to check out. And they all are now visible and count towards your character's total achievement points, regardless of which Covenant you currently belong to. So basically, if I'm over in Necrolord, I can still see all of my stuff for Night Fae, which is really nice. And I still see my accumulated total points counts at the same amount. It doesn't change when I change Covenants. There's just a lot of little like optimization. This is the stuff where I feel like when they were talking about Covenants being a really specific choice that you're making a commitment to and you're not going to be bouncing around a lot, et cetera, that was why the system was designed that way. So it's another one of those, okay, let's alleviate this and fix this because now swapping Covenants is much more common and we want people to have access to it. So updates to achievements inside Covenants. They also,
this is a little bit of housekeeping,
yes, exactly.
For the most part, if you're an achievement collector, if you're like racking up your points, and this is a great change for you because like obviously the system wasn't kind of designed this way, right? The thought was that most people wouldn't switch Covenants or have like significant progress on more than one Covenant. Obviously that didn't end up being the case. So, it's just some housekeeping from that.
Yeah. The Tower Ranger criteria for the achievement for the Jailer's Gauntlet, Layer 4, is now Layer 4. It was Layer 8, so it's now down to Layer 4. So you'll be able to get Tower Ranger easier, which is great. And as far as characters go, they removed the experience point reduction that is applied to level 51 to 60 characters while in party sync. So now if you're party syncing up with friends, you no longer have some sort of experience point reduction that happens if you're within that 51 to 60 range. So you will both be gaining experience like crazy people, and it'll be a really good time. So more reasons to play together with friends, which I think is great. Well, I guess not more reasons, just less reasons to not play with friends, I think is what this really means.
Yeah, I think this was a weird thing. I mean, I guess they wanted to be careful about, like, okay, are people just abusing this? Is there something we're missing?
A level
with, like,
58
some
grouping with
power
level 51.
exploit?
Yeah.
Yeah, and like I don't know. How much does that even really matter? Like beyond the outset of an expansion being brand new when everybody's sort of within the same band, like if somebody's power leveling characters, like is that the end of the world? I don't think this is really what this is going to immediately result in, but it is a vector that you could see somebody figuring out some kind of exploit where the correct split between different levels results in a ton of bonus XP or whatever. But yeah, Party Sync is an awesome feature that I feel like is,
Underutilized.
probably underutilized, underthought about.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, you spend most of your time in WoW at max level anyway, but when you do have a character that you want to level up, or maybe you and a friend are leveling characters up at the same time, don't forget that Party Sync exists because it is really nice.
Yeah. All right, cross-faction. Let's talk about this for a little bit. Players are now able to directly invite members of the opposite faction to a party if you have a battle tag or real ID friendship, or if you're a member of a cross-faction WoW community, like the TSE community, for example, which you can get access to through our Discord. Pre-made groups in the group finder listings for mythic dungeons, raids, or rated arena/battlegrounds are now open to applicants of both factions, though the group leader may choose to restrict the listing to same faction applicants if they so choose. So there's part of our sort of answer to our question. Apparently, you can have pre-made groups of rated battlegrounds or RBGs. It's just the random battlegrounds.
It's the match-made stuff that doesn't work.
It doesn't work.
Yeah,
So
which brawls would be match-made, for example.
Yes.
Even if you had a 40-player group, it'd probably still be considered match-made. So, too bad.
Yeah. WoW communities now have the option to be cross-faction, while guilds will remain single-faction. I know there was an exploit/bug that happened over on PTR that sort of stopped that from being a thing, and they have since gone and tried to resolve that problem, and they did resolve that problem, and now you can't do that anymore. So for a little while, I know that it was possible to actually have a cross-faction guild, so I guess we know that the feature exists, it just isn't in the game. Okay, random match-made activities like heroic dungeon skirmishes or random battlegrounds will remain same faction. The following instances are not cross-faction, and this is something we mentioned earlier: Trial of the Crusader, Trial of the Champion, Vault of Archivon, Icecrown Citadel, Barrett and Hold, Siege of Borealis, Battle of Dazar'alor, Darkmaul Citadel, which is the Exile's Reach dungeon. These are the dungeons that are centered around faction as far as story goes, and there's actually mechanics in some of them that are centered on faction, so it just doesn't make sense to have those be cross-faction. So I assume those will probably remain like that for a long time. I don't think we expect to see those going cross-faction anytime soon.
I think that'd be a weird and probably pointless use of developer resources to like redo Trial of the Crusader so that it was non-faction specific. Like,
yeah,
do you really need your cross-faction buddy to come help you do, a 13-year-old instance for transmog? Like, probably not. That's probably just not a priority.
Yeah.
I mean, I think what this does probably mean is that faction-specific PvE content probably doesn't really continue to get developed, which I don't really think is a bad thing. I'm not sure how much the faction-specific vibe of most of these really added to the process. Like Trial of the Crusader, maybe like that. That was very thematic for that particular raid. Icecrown Citadel, like you're just swapping one thing for another, but it's relatively the same experience with some different art assets, different models. You have the world PvP objective-based things, which they haven't done in forever. It makes sense for those to be faction-specific because of the PvP element, but Siege of Borealis, I think, was kind of interesting, but I wouldn't say it was like a huge success. Battle of Dazar'alor was really the exact same thing, just in different orders. So I don't know if it's really worth building stuff out like that in a world where there's no reason to assume that all the players in the group are in one faction. For starter stuff like Darkmaul Citadel, if they ever did something like that again, I think it would be fine because you probably still, from a story perspective, you want to funnel players of the same faction choice into like a storyline with other characters, quest givers, NPCs, stuff like that are of that faction, right? Like otherwise, what's the point of even having it at all? But yeah, I wouldn't hold your breath for a Trial of the Crusader rework.
Yeah. All right, as far as the raid goes, cross-realm raiding is now available in Mythic difficulties for Sepulchre of the First Ones. So just as a heads up, if you're a team that is, suffering on attendance, perhaps there's a deal that can be made between you and some Horde side players, or maybe there's friends who you haven't been able to play with for a while that you can now dive in with. Either way, that is now an option for all raiders, which is kind of exciting. As far as Mythic Plus goes, cross-faction instances are now available for the Cryptic Hero Shadowlands Season 3 achievement. It now requires a Mythic Plus rating in the top 0.01% of all players in your region. So keep this in mind, guys. The competition for this is extreme between the two factions. There's a lot of very, very, very good Alliance Mythic Plus players who are now competing with the Horde Mythic Plus players. So not only are you able to then hop into Mythic Plus with cross-faction, it means that Cryptic Hero is going to be a very tricky thing to try and get. So keep that in mind. That top 1% is pretty extreme. All right.
Yeah, that bar just shot through the roof.
Yeah, it did.
Putting everybody together. I mean, yeah, it was already pretty hard to do. And it's really going to be the best of the best in each region at this point. So, which makes sense. I mean, that's the way it needs to be, right? Yeah. I guess. I mean, this is just the world that we're going to live in.
I think this sort of foretells, too, what I think will happen with Hall of Fame, which will just become a Hall of Fame for the first 100 teams. And they'll just cut it off after that. It won't be,
I hope so,
faction specific. It'll just be the first 100 teams, is what I imagine it is. In order to actually count as a team, you would still need to have, 18 out of 20 players would have to be the same guild or something like that. Yeah,
there's some percentage that you have to meet. So for a 20-player group, it would be 18, I believe, yeah.
So, you would still have to meet that requirement to get into Hall of Fame. Teams that are not guild groups do not get into Hall of Fame, as an FYI. That was something that our leadership of our team made very clear to our raiders of do not swap factions when this goes live today, because you will no longer be part of the guild, which means you will no longer be in on our kill for Jailer, because we want Hall of Fame. We want to be sure we're killing it with a guild group. So that is something that people like myself and teams like mine will have to wait on doing, is jumping into Jailer with cross-faction and all that cross-faction stuff. I know there's several members who are pretty excited to hop onto classes that they've been wanting to play for a long time. Personally, and this is probably an interesting thing to get into between me and you, Jason, I think it's probably the same. I don't see myself changing from Night Fae. It's just I really enjoy the Night Fae lore. I enjoy the Night Fae race, and I love Shadow Meld. It's one of my favorite abilities in the entire game, so not having that seems kind of horrendous. Although I have always wanted to play a Tauren. I really do like them a lot as a race. I agree with a lot of their morals and principles, but that Shadow Meld racial, I think, is keeping me Alliance side for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I have so many tunes. If I want to play a Horde tune, I have plenty of them I can go play.
Yeah.
I don't know. As an Alliance main, the time to switch to a Horde tune was at any other time before today. Right? I mean, I guess if due to your social structure or whatever that you play with happens to be Alliance, but you just prefer the Horde aesthetic, okay, cool. But by and large, this should result in more people playing Alliance, because you can do so without it being so punitive, because now your pool is so restricted and all that. That is the logical way that this should work. Not a bunch of Alliance players wanted to play Horde, but they were held hostage by circumstances beyond their control, and so now they're playing Horde. If playing Horde is what you looked in your heart and your heart told you wanted to do, you should have been doing that, I think. But I mean, whatever. Honestly, every circumstance is different. People have different things that appeal to them, different things that are important to them. But for me, I wouldn't have been. I just prefer the Alliance aesthetic. I prefer everything about that experience, and I would, for convenience and for efficiency, I would have switched years ago. The whole cross faction thing is just it's a problem that became unsolvable through inaction, and so they just gave up on attempting to solve it and just said, whatever, it's not our problem anymore.
Right.
So It just kind of is what it is. In terms of I know some people that are going to swap to Horde for tunes that they play with us, and like that's cool. This is what they wanted to do, I guess. But it is a little weird. I guess that means that you like playing with us better than you really care about your character's aesthetic.
Right.
It might result in us being able to, like my guild, being able to pick up some Horde recruits who we wouldn't have had access to otherwise. But I don't know. We're in such a weird transitional state anyway because Blizzard has let our server die. So I don't know. We need more information about what's going to happen with that. I'm not expecting a deluge of, Horde applicants over the next few weeks here. But it's it's an option, I guess. I wouldn't be against it if a decent applicant was interested in coming along with us. But
probably probably the neatest thing for me as far as rating goes with cross faction coming in is when you're looking to recruit people, they don't necessarily have to spend money to faction swap in order to just app with you. That's really attractive. And once we move into the part where cross-realm rating is then open, which will happen, I assume, in the next month. We will then see people who are wanting to apply from all sorts of different factions towards our team, able to do so and trial with us as their current faction, as their current race, from whatever server they're on. And that is just a lot more freedom when it comes to people applying. There are definitely going to be discussions that happen, I'm sure, around: is it important we stay Horde? Is it important we stay Alliance? Maintaining, as I talked about, that guild kills, how important that is. I'm sure there's going to be teams out there who almost are run entirely through a community as opposed to being run through a guild. That guilds will become less and less of an important factor, and it'll become very much more communities. Unless they do something to sort of enhance guilds in some way, which I desperately want them to. Just FYI, I'm a huge supporter of guilds. I dislike that this is the direction things are going, but that's what I see happening, is that communities will become much more prominent. And as long as you're not trying to compete for like Hall of Fame, being one of the top 100 guilds in the world or top 200 guilds in the world, whatever they choose to do with it, I don't see a reason why you would need to have guild kills versus just having a community and people get together on these 3 nights a week and they show up and you all hop into Discord or whatever it is and you chat and you play the game together and you have a good time. And the fact that you're not a quote unquote guild group won't play a role in that at all. So just something to keep in mind going forward. It's going to be interesting to see how this changes the face of rating. The biggest change I think we'll see with cross-faction content like this is in Mythic Plus. I think in Mythic Plus, it is going to be a massive, massive change when it comes to how easy it is for everyone to find groups. There's going to just be a substantial more groups inside the group finder with a huge variety of more players to choose from. We have no idea what that's going to do to the environment when it comes to people who are used to playing Alliance side. I think Horde side will be fairly similar. There's going to be some Alliance groups sort of sprinkled in there, since at any given point there was like maybe 20 plus 15 groups on Alliance side active at a given time. Like there's not a lot that are regularly going. Whereas Horde side, there was, dozens. So I think you're just going to have the Alliance ones sprinkled in with the Horde ones. But from Alliance side perspective, it should be a lot more availability. We don't know if that means it's going to be harder to find a group or easier, because there might just be a lot more higher IO rated players than you out there that you're competing for spots with, or a lot more people playing the class or the covenant that they're looking for that group than there was before. With more option doesn't always mean it's a good thing for the player who's trying to find a group. We just hope it does. So I'll be interested to see how that pans out too going forward.
I got to think it's a bonanza for NA Alliance players, because the selection's just been so limited. Like, at least now there's stuff you can app to. And if you have a high rating and you're playing something meta, like, you'll probably get invites if you can get in there and apply quickly.
Right.
It's just, there's just so few keys listed Alliance side as compared to Horde side NA. So I think that is a big benefit. I mean, I wanted to just circle back to what you were saying about communities. And communities now instantly become an essential feature to playing this game in an organized way. And I don't think they're ready. Agreed. I don't think the product was delivered very well like 2.5 years ago. It hasn't really been significantly improved at all. It's basically an annoyance in my day-to-day WoW play, and I'm not really looking forward to having to manage my guild group and my raid team via communities, because communities is like a BattleNet feature. It sits on top of the game. It doesn't feel integrated into the game in like the way that guilds are, and it doesn't work with tools that I have to manage my guild, do auto invites or whatever. I'm not looking forward to it. I think it's going to be a logistical headache. I hope that maybe with it being a necessity now, that maybe that means we get some significant communities upgrades. I mean, the feature works. It's just it functions, right? You can exchange chat. You can use it to form groups. It's got voice chat built into it, whatever. It's just so clunky, and it's so not integrated into what, the typical pre-communities WoW experience was like. I don't know. I don't love it. I've never have. I don't think the community's product has ever been particularly good. So I'm not looking forward to it. I think, tonight and going forward, it's going to be a pain in the ass for me to keep my group together, because I'm going to have to scroll through the community stuff and try to find the different chat channels and make sure everybody is joined into the community and they have the link. I'm going to have to repost the link like 700 times in the next, several weeks here. And, I'm used to, I click the button, I get the invites out to the people that need them, and then I go, and that's not going to be an option for me anymore. So hopefully it's the start of, obviously we know there's a big UI rework coming in 10.0 and in Dragonflight, and, hopefully it becomes clear what kind of upgrades we need and how this needs to be streamlined, and that starts happening. Maybe this is the impetus that we needed to get a better communities product.
Yeah, maybe. I hope so, at least. As far as items and rewards go, the Broker's Mark of Distinction, which is the item that increases your renown on a character, has been upgraded from 40 to 60. So it now sets your character's renown to 60, which is super exciting. And the catch-up is accelerated. Basically, it used to, the renown catch-up used to cap out at 48 and now caps out at 60 as well. So helping everyone catch up faster. We talked about a lot of this stuff on last week's show, so I'm not going to chat about all of it or give opinions on all of it, but this is just good stuff. I want to make sure I'm reminding you.
This is the thing for me. It's like, okay, I'm going to take my main and I'm going to max out all 4 covenants, because I'm going to zoom right to 60. I know I'm going to get guaranteed renown from a lot of different sources, and then I'll be done, and I can kind of do the whole collection loop with a lot less friction. So, on my other characters, it's not as big of a deal. I don't think I'll really do it to any big extent, because I don't do much with them anyway. But on the main, and also having the flexibility to go, realistically, Prot Warrior, you're looking at Kyrian or Night Fae, depending on what you're doing. So I've been Night Fae all expansion, being able to flex Kyrian for a particular Mythic Plus, or just for, the extra, the juice for rating and stuff, and not have that be like a permanent part of my character's identity for this expansion is going to be great. It's something I haven't done at all, but once I saw this come in, I was like, okay, I think now it's definitely time to at least have the option.
Yeah. The reward boxes from Callings now contain twice as many Grateful Offerings, and basically just Grateful Offerings in general are going to be much more accessible to your character, so keep that in mind. The Patterns Within Patterns quest that we pump up every week is also now rewarding Grateful Offerings. Grateful Offerings are the currency that you use to buy special high-end transmog and mounts and pets from all your Covenant vendors. So just more sources of these is fantastic. So this helps me on my journey. It's going to help you guys on your journey to get those collections done. So certainly worth grabbing all of your callings and everything now. With that double increase, you're going to stockpile these like crazy. I think each Covenant requires at least, I think it's 1,000 or 1,200 Grateful Offerings to get everything from a Covenant, so you're going to need them. So be sure you're collecting them. It's certainly a worthwhile thing to do.
This is a nice buff, because now we're in a world where, if you realistically just want to collect everything from every Covenant on your character, that's doable with the amount of anima that we get, and then with them scaling this up, you can go do it. If it means something to you, is it going to be work? Yeah, but can you do it at your own pace, on your own schedule, do as much or as little of it as you want at any one time? Basically, you can get all the souls you need, you can get a ton of anima. Grateful Offerings are still kind of a daily thing, but you can get a lot of them. Like they're really pumping this up, so it's good. What's the point of having that stuff in there if you have to pick and choose which of it you can afford to collect, right? Like, just give us the means to collect everything if that's what we want. That's how collectors want to operate anyway. You don't want to. If you're a collector, you don't want just some of the stuff to collect. You want the collection.
Yeah, well, and we're also going to be in this content for a long time, so I think at your own pace is a really good way of putting it, because if you just choose to do 3 callings a week and do the, patterns within patterns quest, you're probably going to be getting enough Grateful Offerings throughout the next 12 weeks or more so before we see season 4 and we start kicking into that season, to be able to do a lot of upgrade and purchases that you want to do. And then on top of that, you have however long that season lasts before the end of the expansion. And then even in the next expansion, you could always come back and do stuff in this. Like they've accelerated it enough that right. I think it's going to feel like a much more rewarding grind to do, which is going to be nice. There's a good feeling. At one point you could essentially every week buy a piece of transmog from your Covenant. And that felt good for doing daily, everyday activity. It needs to get back to that point again, even faster. I think it needs to be like every 3 or 4 days, you're able to buy a piece of something that's really kind of cool and exciting to keep people in the loop if that's what they want to do. And I think this helps us get to that point. So good to see. Okay. The new arena, the Enigma Crucible, is now going to be out there. So it's in. Obviously, we talked last week about their decision to not have the mechanism and to just not do a mechanism inside this space that makes pillars raise up and down. So they just have static pillars in this space, but it's a new arena. If it's something you want to check out, get in there and check it out for sure. As far as PvP tuning goes, they did a couple things with a few classes, primarily survivability-wise. Death Knight's anti-magic zone spell damage reduction was increased to 50%, up from 20%. Demonic Embrace for Warlocks now increases your stamina by 20%, it was 10%. Just some tuning to sort of get things in line. They did that across a few classes, so keep that in mind. Again, tuning specifically the PvP talents, I think, is a really nice thing to do, or things that affect PvP only is a nice way to do it, because then you're not really screwing with classes that don't do a lot of PvP, which makes me super happy to see. So, Jason, this next one's just for you. Increase the experience points earned when crafting specialized armor and jewelry for creating rune crafting items by 400%.
Yeah, this is huge.
Massive.
Man, it's way overdue. Like it's 2 patches overdue, yeah. But you know what, man? Better late than never. Mm-hmm. I've been waiting for this for a long time because I don't have this giant alt stable. Anybody who doesn't wear plate, I don't have maxed out, legendaries on them. They're whatever, 249 or whatever it is, the thing that adds rank 1 plus 4. Because that, that's pretty cheap to make and it's decent power. But now I will be able to get my crafters skilled up for the pieces that I need to make. It's going to be very streamlined and awesome and rewarding to make some max item level legendaries. So this is a huge game changer. I will now certainly never sell my giant stack of low item level base pieces that I had to make to skill up all the different slots I learned to make on my blacksmith. Yeah. If there was any doubt that maybe they would move to some degree, like they're definitely not going to now. I'm holding out hope that maybe we get some kind of hot fix, at least makes them vendorable. But my leather worker and my JCer and my tailor are really going to benefit from this, and it's going to feel really good. I mean, 15 crafts per rank was just way too much. It was too much on day 1. It was too much yesterday. This is obviously like a mega late expansion benefit to only have to do 3 crafts per rank. I'm not saying it should have been 3 crafts per rank out the gate, but 15 was obviously way too much. So if you have some fresh tunes, some 60s with some low gear, but you've skilled up some professions and you want to make some legendaries, you can start doing that, once servers are up in your region without any fear that you're doing something suboptimally. This is about as optimal as it's ever going to get.
Yep. Very true. As far as Torghast goes, guys, FYI, we usually talk about at the top of the show and talk about which wings are available. They're all available now. It was just 2 that were available. Now they are all available all of the time. So that is an exciting thing that came in. Keep that in mind. If you need to be working on any of those, you can just get in there and run whatever wing you want to do for achievements.
Yeah, this was one of the last really stupid things about this expansion that I'm glad they're getting rid of. Because, stuff like memories was locked behind this, right?
Oh, yeah.
So I leveled up my Demon Hunter this week. What do I need to make a legendary? Oh, I need one that comes out of Torghast. Oh, that wing was up last week. Well, maybe in 3 weeks I can make the item I want. Like, just way too much friction there. Now you can just do whatever you want. This is another one of these things where they should have changed this a while ago, but I'm not going to complain about it getting changed now. Like, this is very good. Torghast is going to be way more flexible, way more accessible. If you have stuff in there you need to do, you can go do it essentially. You don't, if you're new to the system, you don't have to start with like layer 1 and work your way all the way up, which is, kind of laughable in terms of the power requirement based on what you can get in Zereth Mortis quickly. And yeah, you don't have to wait for some inscrutable weekly rotation to find the wing that you want. Like, you just go there and you do what you need to do to get what you came for. So I love it. I mean, I don't really want to do a lot of Torghast anymore. I haven't done any stuff this season in there at all, really, of importance. And I don't know if I even need anything out of there for my stable at this point. But if I decide I need something, at least I can just go get it. So that's awesome. That's the way it should be.
Yeah, I don't know if I ever finished all the Torghast achievements. So at least this means that the time where I get an itch to just complete something and get some achievements, this is now on the list of I can just go to Torghast and knock out some achievements if that's something I want to do. I find that always attractive of, what do I want to do today? Well, let's pop open the achievement log. Is there anything inside the achievement journal that I really want to knock out? Oh, well, look, there is something there. Hey, let's pop over and do that. And it's not one of those things where you get all excited about it, arrive at it, and then go, oh, that's not up this week. Oh, that's unfortunate. Okay, well, I guess I'll try and find something else. Well, what else do I want to do? Well, maybe I'll just, I'll just hearth, and then we'll decide what I want to do. And then, maybe we'll log out of the game for a bit. And you're like, oh, well, then I've lost the motivation, right? It's unfortunate. So it's great when this stuff's all up. All right.
I would really like to see this kind of design concept just go away. Like the rotating, like, okay, this content's available this week, and then there's similar but different content the next week, and so on and so forth.
We're heading into a raid tier that is just that. Yeah,
but at least that's recycled content, right? Like, I guess if you're recycling it, it's okay. But if it's relevant stuff, I mean, if you need something specific, that kind of rotation just doesn't feel good after a while.
I'll say it felt really bad early in the expansion when there was no other way to get legendaries. When your legendary came off a world boss and you had to wait 4 weeks for your world boss to spawn, that felt really bad early in the expansion.
Yeah. I guess that's really not necessarily going away. But
no, but that was a reason why there should always be a way in the game to earn something like a particular legendary from some sort of grind. That's not, is it happen to be up? No, it's not. Does it happen to be up? No, it's not. Does it happen to be up? No, it's like, that just feels really bad. Of the game's just not giving me the opportunity to put time into the game to earn something. That's
right.
That's
the thing that really gets under my skin. Just let me play the game and let me do the thing and get, put the work in to get the reward. Like, that's kind of the basis of an MMORPG in a lot of ways. Yeah. So I would love to see them not have that kind of like rotating content in Dragonflight like built into the experience. Just let me play the game.
Yeah. Speaking of other reasons to log in and play the game, the Blood Elves and the Dark Iron Dwarves now both have a quest that they can pick up. For the Blood Elves, it's from Liadrin inside Oribos, and for the Dark Iron Dwarves, it's from Anvilthane Thurgoden in Shadowforge City. The Blood Elves one requires level 60 and Exalted with Silvermoon, and the Dark Iron Dwarves requires level 50. And these quests get you a new mount, weapon appearance, armor. It's all the heritage stuff that's attached to these races. It's very cool stuff. So if you play a Blood Elf or a Dark Iron Dwarf, or you have one inside your stable of characters, or you just want to start making one, this is a motivation to get into doing that. The mount, weapon appearance, and armor sets are all very, very cool. It's certainly worth going after and worth logging into play for sure.
Yeah, I have a Dark Iron Dwarf that meets these criteria, I believe. So I need to go do this because the weapon appearances will really put it over the top. Like, having weapons that match your heritage armor is so cool. Yeah. The Blood Elf thing is a little bit more of a problem. I do have a Blood Elf that's level 50 and Exalted with Silvermoon, but it's not a Paladin, so I might have to make a new Paladin at some point this summer or something. I'm a sucker for stuff like this, even if it doesn't really live in my sort of corner of the WoW universe, which Blood Elves sort of don't, but the rewards are too unique and cool for me to go, nah, I don't want to do that. Like, I might actually do this just specifically for that at some point. Maybe not today, not this week, but Definitely something I got to try to remember that it's in the game and keep it on my radar so that I can do it. Cause I think that would be a really cool thing to have, on my account. I love when they do stuff like this. I want them to do the rest of the heritage sets for the other races that didn't get them in BFA and at the end of Legion.
Yeah. All right. The last little note for this is under user interface and accessibility that I wanted to cover. The default hand cursor now has a higher resolution for its larger sizes. We talked a little while back that under options and accessibility, you can actually make the hand cursor larger, so it's easier to find it on your screen and keep track of it. But when you blew it up, it looked pretty gross because you were just blowing up the original size icon. They've now added in higher resolution versions of that hand icon, which means it now scales up and looks good when it's scaled up, which is great. So this is always nice to see accessibility changes come in. Super happy to see that. The other thing they did is they redesigned the report player pane and added new categories for when you're reporting players. And something underneath this category I wanted to discuss a little bit was Warcraft's new social contract that they are putting into the game. This is one of the things that they're trying to prepare for Dragonflight. And basically when you log in, there's going to be a social contract pane that pops up, basically agreeing to not be a terrible human being inside of the video game. The social contracts are a great way for developers and for game creators to basically say, we warned you when it comes to people's negative behaviors inside the game. And I think it's great to see Warcraft moving in that direction, the team moving in that direction towards having players agree that, you're not going to be a jerk, and you're not going to be racist, and you're not going to be homophobic, and you're not going to be, someone who basically in general who shuts down communities and destroys communities, right? Not going to be toxic is what they're getting you to agree to be. So I'm super excited and happy that they've moved in this direction, because whatever gives them more authority to go, we told you shouldn't do this when someone is acting that way is great, because they can get rid of them that much faster.
Yeah. I mean, this is, the WoW community doesn't exactly have the best reputation on the internet, and deservedly so in a lot of ways. I feel like this is very overdue, but also I don't feel like the correct response to an 18-year-old problem is to go, well, we never tried to fix it before, so why should we start now? I think this is a good first step. I think improving the reporting functionality and just laying out kind of the rules and expectations of like what is acceptable in terms of treating other players within the game, like spelling that out is a good thing. It mirrors a lot of like what I try to do in my own guild and stuff, right? Like it's not really any different than that by and large, except for obviously the guild. The guild thing is not like a condition of accessing the game. It's not quite at that level, but it's the same sort of idea, right? So yeah, I'm glad to see it. I don't think it's going to represent any kind of massive change like
Agreed.
Today or this week, but I think it's important for the developer to spell this stuff out and to let the players know and to give players the tools to say, hey, this person's not playing fair. This person's not playing within the rules. And to be able to back that up with what the policy and the expectations are, it can only help, right? I think. I mean,
That's
I don't know. Might some people get reported for some behavior that really wasn't what it seemed like, and then they catch a ban that they shouldn't have? Like, I don't know, man. Maybe. Like, could that happen? Sure. But maybe, somebody should have thought about this stuff before they went down that road where they were potentially getting reported for their behavior, and maybe if it makes people do that, it's a good thing. I don't know. It's just a lot of games have this kind of stuff already and have had it for a really long time.
Yeah.
And WoW has lagged behind it like desperately. And WoW is such a social game that it just stuck out like a sore thumb.
Yeah.
So I'm glad that they're making changes and they're keeping an eye on it in a way that honestly they haven't in the past 17 years. So I think this is a first step on a road to like a better and more inclusive and welcoming and less toxic community, that's where I want to play.
Yeah, agreed. I'm 100% behind that. And I know that other games that have things like this, like League of Legends, for example, have gotten better and better over time at cracking down on outbursts that can happen. And League is one of those games in particular where when you're inside of a game and someone's not doing something that someone else necessarily agrees with, an explosion of language can happen and interaction can happen back and forth between those two people. And knowing just how quickly and how I strongly Riot now deals with those problems, it'd be really, really refreshing and rewarding to see Blizzard move that direction as well. Because I really like how I even know from friends I know who've been banned from League of Legends on multiple accounts, multiple times, because they just go off the handle every now and then. And going off the handle isn't something that's ever acceptable inside of a situation where you're dealing with other human beings. You certainly don't have a right to direct any kind of hateful speech towards those people. So it's one of those cases where when that happens, they need to be able to address it quickly. And if this helps them do that, then great. Or at least move them in that direction, then great. Okay. Sepulchre are the first ones, adjustments that take place today, basically. As far as patch 9.2.5 unlocks cross-server Mythic Sepulchre. So guess what? That's there. And as we move into the later months of this tier, I find it funny that they talk about the later months of this tier. Like, I got to stop for a second when I'm reading this, because this is by far like the hardest tier of World of Warcraft raid we have ever experienced. It took longer for all of the top teams. It's taking longer for every other team. So it almost feels a little insulting to be like, we move into the later months. Let's start doing. You're like, whoa. Like, you designed content that wasn't going to get cleared for 4 months. All right. That's what everyone thought it was going to be 2. And now it's going to take 4. And let's just be, honest about that. But yes, as they move into the later months.
It's like old school, man. It's like, how long bosses used to live back in the day.
Yeah.
Lady
Vash was that. Yeah.
We got to be about halfway through now, right? Like just a sheer plurality of the season has probably passed by now, or just about. Maybe next week, maybe the week after, it'll be about like the straight up midway point of the season. So yeah. I mean, it's it is what it is.
Yeah,
I have very mixed feelings about this tier overall, because I think it is a cool raid, but it also has created a lot of stress for me, and it is weird to have such attainable prog goals still on the table after so long, and feeling like we're not appreciably moving towards it. It's been a real marathon so far, and I don't think that that's fun for many players when it goes on for this long.
Yeah, I completely agree, and I know there's a lot of teams that have been stuck on Anduin, for example, for an extended period of time and haven't been able to knock that boss over and move on to the next thing. And so seeing some of these nerfs come through, it makes sense that they're making these adjustments, because what they go on to say is they want to smooth out these pain points for, both progression and repeat kills on several bosses in the zone, including in this round of changes. They've made quite a few adjustments to Sepulchre in recent weeks, and they wanted to extend those changes more. So they've heard extensive feedback from players running Sepulchre on all difficulties that a number of mechanics feel too unforgiving, and that there are just too many places where a single error by a single player can cause an unrecoverable wipe. We agree, which FYI was interesting if you listened to our raid tuning conversation last week about them really talking about specifically how they design encounters, how that sort of metric looks and works. So interesting that they are agreeing that there's too many unrecoverable situations from a mistake one player makes. And several of the recent changes have been aimed at reducing those penalties. This is a major topic of discussion within the team as they plan for Dragonflight raid encounters and focus on delivering satisfying progression experiences for all players on all difficulties. I think, as a result of this, that first Dragonflight raid for Race World First, it's going to be a 1 week clear, and everyone else is going to be done in like a month and a half. I think it's going to be the easiest raid tier. So. I think it's going to be the easiest raid tier we have seen in a long time. That first raid tier. I think it's a great methodology, especially for a first raid of an expansion.
I think that's the way to go, man. Like, lower friction overall is just more fun, and people can try to do harder modes or bring different characters or whatever. Like, I don't know. That's just kind of where I'm at. I think the player base is old and getting older, and I don't know, man. People just want to log in and have fun with their friends at the end of the night. I think it's a big part of it. And like, yes, you have to make interesting and cool fights, and they need to try weird stuff. And sometimes that weird stuff is more punishing than they intend it to be. But I mean, the one thing that I have to say without any kind of reservation about Sepulchre is that they've been really good about making changes. they have changed Anduin Wrynn more than any other boss I can ever remember in the history of this game. The amount of times it's been nerfed, the number of elements of the fight that have been nerfed, the degree to which it's been nerfed, like, I've never seen anything like it. It's just all the time. They're constantly tweaking that fight and trying to make it more accessible and a smoother reclear and all this stuff. And they needed to. It came out of the gate way too hot, and it's a great. I mean, I really think it's a conceptually and the way it plays out, it's a really well designed fight, but it's just been a tuning quagmire since the day it came out. Yep. And I think, I mean, it's getting really lit up here, but I think it's still going to be, a fight that you have those moments where you go, why is this so hard tonight?
I think the biggest takeaway for this for me of getting a raid tier next expansion that I think is going to be like a 1 week, fast team clear, and then like a, maybe a 5 or 6 week clear for the top 200 or 300 teams, and then everyone else sort of falls in that 8 week kind of range. I think is going to be the fact that it then frees up those teams to have breaks between content. I remember BFA and the pacing of BFA, where we went from one raid tier to the next raid tier to the next. Like, we killed Jaina on the week before the next raid tier came out, and then we killed that boss on the week before the next raid tier came out, and we killed, like, it literally went. We were in prog mode for like months, for a year. I think we were in prog mode for almost 14 months straight for our raid team when we were doing that on Mythic, and we were top 100 Alliance, and then top 38 World, and then like. And as far as trying to get breaks go, there just was not a lot of breaks for our team. So I would appreciate having we get everything done in 2 months, and then we have 3 months of not, just sort of re-clear and farm and have a good time, and it's just a couple nights a week. I agree with you. It's an aging population who play this game, and I think a lot of people have busy lives, and I don't think it's nice to feel like you need to commit 4 nights a week or 12 hours a week or 10 hours a week to this content for 4 months. I think that is a lot to ask of the player base. And if it's all because Anduin Wrynn has 5% more health and you could have just taken that 5% health off, come on, guys. Like, that's an easy thing, right? So I do appreciate these nerfs. I just wish the content was launched in the state that we're getting it to now, as opposed to it launched where it was and is now being scaled and scaled and scaled and scaled. Had Halandris as a fight been tuned, in my opinion, better when it was first launched, they wouldn't have had to gut it entirely. Like, they gutted that fight entirely from what it used to be. And it was an incredibly cool fight that I was looking forward to reclears on. I was looking forward to killing that boss throughout the next chunk of time as in its original form. And I can only hope that when Season 4 launches, we get OG Halandris tuned better. Like, that to me would be great. I would really appreciate that. And tuned better meaning like when someone screws up a bomb, it puts a debuff on the raid that the next bomb is going to kill everybody, as opposed to someone drops a bomb, the whole raid wipes. Like, that is the type of change that can happen that allows you to keep the bombs as a challenging mechanic, as opposed to going, no, one person can do all of the bombs by themselves with an immunity, and then the next person can, the next person can, which is just a ridiculous strategy that we're seeing now in that fight, because the bombs can be placed for so long. So I think nailing tuning is really important in Dragonflight, and I'm really looking forward to that. I also would love to see these really interesting fights that they create not get gutted down to the point where they're just not the same fight anymore. Because they designed something really cool and fun, and I don't think everyone gets to experience that. And that's sad to me. That, a lot of people I know didn't get to experience Halandris the way it was because they just decided that it was extremely difficult from where they wanted it to be and just hit it with the biggest bat they could possibly find. So it's unfortunate. All right, anyways, moving into these nerfs themselves. Artificer Zymox, the Decipher Relic cast time increased to 30 seconds from 25 seconds on Mythic. Prototype Pantheon, the imprinted safeguards reduced damage and healing taken by 35%. It was 50. So right off the bat, these two nerfs make these bosses more forgiving. Like, not massively more forgiving, but it's a nice tweak. Lahuvium, his health was reduced by 10% on all difficulties. Lahuvium on normal and heroic is almost a bit of a joke as far as difficulty goes comparatively to Mythic. On Mythic, it is actually an encounter where people have to pay attention and do their jobs and actually execute the fight well. It's still not the most difficult boss in here, but I do like that this is going to bring the Mythic fight closer to what it should feel like as a evolution from normal to heroic. There was too big of a leap. So I do like that the 10% nerf, even though it's applied to all difficulties, it's going to feel really good on Mythic. The Protoform Schematics health, so the ads that spawn in, 10% reduced health on all difficulties. Again, bringing that Mythic one, in my opinion, down closer to where the heroic one is. So glad to see that as well. Halandris the Reclaimer. Ephemeral Eruption initial damage reduced on Mythic difficulty, and Light Shatter Beam increases the damage taken from Light Shatter Beam by 300% on heroic difficulty, was 500%. Jason, does this mean that double Light Shatter Beam is now livable?
Yeah, it should be. If you're tough enough, if you can handle it.
Man, that it's just one of those cases of like Light Shatter Beam already does a lot of damage, and taking 300% increased damage from it versus 500%, they clearly feel like this is a benchmark that someone can live through now.
Yeah, like if you're in the 270s and you had some stuff lined up, like you could live through 2 Light Shatters. It wouldn't be pretty, and your healers wouldn't like it, but it could be doable. I would still recommend swapping every Light Shatter Beam.
Yeah,
but you have a little bit more flexibility, especially if you need to crack the things that have the shells around them, and it just makes more sense regarding the tank's relative positions to each other or something. But yeah, one of the biggest problems with Halandris was that just its regular autos, the lance that it spams was doing way too much damage and ignoring damage reduction and stuff like that. So you take a Light Shatter Beam, which already hurt, and then it would spam a couple lances at you, and then if you get that second Light Shatter, forget about it. So
yeah.
Halandris was just doing too much tank damage from when it first got put into the game, and they're dialing that back in a bit. I mean, Light Shatter Beam's a thing that you swap on, right? So you should swap on it.
Yeah.
But having the flexibility, like, okay, maybe I eat this one. The other tank died to some kind of an oopsie, so we just can't get the res off in time between these Light Shatter Beams. But if I hit my big button, then I'll survive the second one, and then we can get back on track. Like stuff like that can save a wipe. So, that's it's a good change. Halandris was a fight that, like on heroic and on lower difficulties, was unnecessarily scary when it first came out because the tank damage was just shockingly high, and it was partially because of tuning and partially because it was broken.
Well, I want to use dev speak from last week, which is they've now made the affordance of this ability better, which is what they're going for. So
yes,
I appreciated having to learn what affordance meant inside game dev speak, so wanted to use it again. All right, Anduin Wrynn. They reduce his health by 5% on all difficulties. They reduce the Monstrous Soul's health by 5% on all difficulties. They reduce Anduin's Despair health by 10% on all difficulties. Anduin's Hope movement speed reduction on heroic and mythic difficulty Anduin's Hope movement speed has been reduced on, I was like, what does that mean? All right, has been reduced on heroic and mythic difficulties. Remorseless Winter damage reduced by 10% on all difficulties. Hopebreaker damage over time reduced by 15% on all difficulties. Fiendish Soul's Necrotic Claws cooldown increased by 50% on all difficulties. All right, what does this all mean? Well, it means Anduin has less health. The Monstrous Soul that you have to kill also has less health, and Anduin's Despair also has less health. So all those Anduin Despairs you have to kill, they're going to die easier. Everything's going to die easier. Your DPS requirements lower. You could bring more healers if you wanted to. Is what this sort of means. It also means if your group comp isn't ideal, which is something I want to keep emphasizing of, hey, we have 6 healers and 9 DPS and, our 2 tanks. This isn't really ideal comp, but none of our healers know how to DPS, so, this is just what we bring. Well, this now allows a group like that to potentially kill this boss, provided the enrage timer allows them to do that. So this just sort of makes that group flexibility on those lower difficulties actually available, which I think is great. On Mythic, this just means the teams that were almost killing stuff will most certainly walk in and kill stuff tonight, or at least in the next couple of days when they get chances to look at it. Remorseless Winter damage is just less AoE damage, so it means that people aren't going to dip as low during the Remorseless Winter phase, which is great. On top of that, the Fiendish Soul's Necrotic Claws, basically the adds that spawn during the intermission, during the Remorseless Winter, leap around and do like this AoE claw attack, and if they leap onto a player and there's other players within 5 yards, those players get a debuff. That debuff reduces it does damage over time, reduces healing received on that target, and the healing received is pretty substantial. So when people are grouping up too much during this phase, if 1 or 2 people has a ton of stacks of Necrotic Claws, it either means they were incredibly unlucky and all of the things leapt on them multiple times, or they were just standing too close to other people who were getting leaped on. So this increase of 50% means you're essentially going to get half as many claws as you normally got in this fight. So you're going to have substantially less stacks, which makes that Remorseless Winter phase way more survivable. So that is another huge, huge thing. So overall, this fight on all difficulties just got substantially easier. This is the big Anduin nerf that I think a lot of people were waiting for. So as much as we've seen, as Jason's pointed out, a ton of nerfs and changes to this boss, this is the hugest bat they've hit it with so far. They've just been picking up a larger bat and hitting it and going, that's not enough, pick up an even bigger bat and hitting it, and now we're at the biggest bat we've seen so far. So yeah, big Anduin changes.
Yeah, I mean, such massive health reductions should get you through the early parts of the fight much more quickly and reliably, right? You should be able to get Anduin to very low health before Phase 3 starts, if not all the way down to the 10%. The ads are going to be a lot more palatable in the downstairs phases in Phases 1 and 2. I think there's probably still room here. There are so many elements to this fight that, you could nerf the Befouled Barrier again. You could nerf the heroic and up a bomb ad in the intermissions. There's still some stuff, but this is gonna, it's a huge nerf to Hopebreaker, which just keeps happening and stacking up as the fight goes on. Like, that's gonna stress your healers out less. The Fiendish Souls are obnoxious and they're kind of sneaky. Like, a lot of times you don't notice they're there, but sometimes people just kind of like blow up, or, they don't get killed off and then they create a huge problem later on. So that's, all this stuff is good. I think, Anduin is still going to be a challenging fight because of the mechanics, because people are going to die to Blasphemy because they just can't figure it out. People are going to die to walking skeletons in second intermission because they can't figure out the correct path. Sometimes you only have to move like 4 yards. You just like square dance around the circle, the skeleton lines. You don't have to take off and move 40 yards. Yeah. So stuff like that is still going to create deaths and wipes potentially. But I think the good thing here is if you're dying in second intermission, you're dying in Phase 3 or whatever, you're at least seeing the fight. You're starting to develop mastery over it. You're getting practice with the end of the fight where you really need to learn it so that you can put it down. Whereas if you can't, kill off or heal up the ads, then you're never going to be able to, progress the fight. And again, as we've said many a time, this is boss 8 of 11. There's still more bosses after Anduin. Anduin is not the last boss. Yeah. We're almost 3 months into the season. It needs to be an attainable goal for teams that are working on any difficulty. I mean, it's whatever you're progging, like, you need to be able to get past this boss so that you can move on and get to the end of the raid.
Yeah. All right, Lords of Dread, Mal'Ganis and Contessa's health has been reduced by 5% on all difficulties. Swarm of Decay and Swarm of Darkness damage was reduced by 7.5% on all difficulties. Ravenous Hunger now heals the Inchoate ad for 13% on Mythic difficulty, was 10%. Cloud of Carrion no longer disorients when jumping between players on Heroic and Mythic. And Infiltration of Dread duration increased by 10 seconds on Heroic and Mythic difficulties. All right, so less health overall on 2 bosses. Great. That's basically 10% less damage you have to do. On higher difficulties, it's kind of important to kill them at the same time. So certainly something that factors. Swarm of Decay and Swarm of Darkness is just a huge AoE healing phase. So this just means 7.5% reduced damage during those swarms is fantastic and great. That's also the big DPS burn phase, which means your DPS who are tunneling really hard on doing damage because they love seeing really big numbers, means that they are probably more likely to live because they're not hitting their personals or their health stones or their health pots or whatever it is during this because they're tunneling so hard. So that's good. Ravenous Hunger now heals the Inchoate Shadow for 13%, up from 10%. So this ad that spawns basically channels the spell, and every time it channels it, it heals itself. And you cannot, it takes 99% reduced damage until it's healed to 100% health. So the goal with this ad is to let it cast until it hits 100% health and then kill it as fast as possible during this fight. That is the goal with this ad. So it healing for 13% up from 10 isn't actually a buff. It's a nerf to that ad because it's going to reach 100% faster. And it also means if someone happens to dot the ad, which is a sort of a factor that can happen as well, where people are AoE dotting or, whatever it is, and they happen to put stuff on this ad and its health ticks down, you don't end up in a situation like we did where because it was 10% every time, it ends up at 96% health and then has to do a whole other cast to hit 100%, which means every time it completes this cast, it does a ton of raid-wide damage. So you get a whole other wave of raid-wide damage. This is less likely to happen now at that 13%. More likely you're going to land with consistently the same amount of cast, even if it gets dotted up or something happens to it. The dots, by the way, do nothing other than make the raid take more damage because it takes reduced damage until it hits max health. So you can't kill it anyways. You got to let it get to max health. So those dots just essentially make the raid take more damage. So this is a nice change for this, big change for this ad and how it works. It's very subtle when it comes to noticeable mechanics during the fight for DPS players who aren't paying attention to it. But for healers, this is a huge benefit for them. Cloud of Carrion no longer disorienting when it jumps between players on Heroic and Mythic. Also a big deal. I mean, it's not a huge change, but it's a change that you'll notice a lot of bad overlaps tend to happen with one person getting disoriented and then they're standing in something they shouldn't be. And so they get feared out of the disorient, or inside Mythic difficulty, you have to be within 15 yards of other players at all times at range. And so this also is something that can happen where a player gets disoriented and then they're out of range with something and then they get feared and someone has to run over to them to break them out of the fear. It's just one of those little changes that helps out the whole raid overall. And then last but not least, the mechanic that is the quote-unquote experimental sort of fun thing that they did on this fight, the Infiltration of Dread, where everyone becomes hostile to each other and these Dreadlords infiltrate two players. 10 more seconds of leeway on Heroic and Mythic, meaning that you have that whole other additional 10 seconds to actually identify the correct people, DPS those people down, and move on from there. And this affordance was something we talked about a lot last week. On this fight with this particular mechanic of being able to communicate this without using voice comms at all, right? If you are someone who cannot hear, how is this being communicated in the fight properly, right? People need to type it or send messages to be able to do that. And the window that they were giving players was not an acceptable window of time, in my opinion, at all. So I am glad to see that they are increasing that affordance to 10 seconds, which means that people have a lot more time to sort of figure that out, which is great.
Yeah, this is another fight that this is easier, I would say, overall than Anduin, but this is
substantially
another
easier than Anduin.
nightmare. Yeah, but it's another one that you go to reclear it and somebody has a brain fart and you die for 45 minutes because somebody can't figure out that the green goes away and then the green goes in the big purple and then everybody avoids the green, and and that's not even like the quote unquote hard part of the fight, right? That's just a dance you have to do the whole time. I think the health reduction is huge, especially considering the burst windows that you have in this fight. The swarm doing less damage is huge because that can be really punishing. Our group frequently has deaths because of swarm damage, and just we need to have really specific cooldown rotations and stuff set up, or else there's just no chance that everybody's going to survive it, which is sort of a healer comp problem and a throughput problem more than tuning, but I'll take what I can get here. Sometimes you do need to move Cloud of Carrion around, and losing it uptime is obnoxious. Extra time on Infiltration of Dread. I think anybody who's done this fight enough, you have those situations where it's confusing at first and you make a call late and then you almost got them, but then you run out of time and you die anyway. That feels terrible. So that won't be happening anymore. I think just really paring it down more to okay, what do you need to be doing on this fight in any particular moment, and just focusing on that and not making it our cooldowns didn't perfectly overlap, so we died to Swarm of Darkness. I mean, if you're doing normal or heroic rating, I don't think it should be punishing on that level. And the extra time on Infiltration of Dread just helps you. It's a weird mechanic. There's a kernel of something interesting and fun in there, but as it plays out, I find it rarely to actually be fun. But so having the extra time should help out a lot, because you get your bearings, everybody can agree on who you need to target, and you can move on with your life. So that's great. I'm glad they touched that up. Yeah.
All right, Ragallon, they nerfed Collapsing Quasar Field by 50% on Mythic. The Dark Eruption damage was reduced by 45% on Heroic. The Collapsing Quasar Field was increased to 2 seconds from 10 seconds on Heroic. Cosmic Ejection initial damage decreased by 25%, and the damage over time decreased by 73% on heroic difficulty. And this, the developers note, is this should reduce the requirement to split the damage amongst multiple players or utilizing player immunities to avoid the damage altogether. Yeah, the immunity thing was definitely something that my team was doing for these. So overall, just making Rygallon a bit easier, which is great to see. The damage over time effect by 73% is massive on heroic. This is something that makes this much more manageable for healers. This was a very healing intensive fight. It was kind of a crazy fight to try and heal, so this is stuff I'm not surprised to see when it comes to this kind of thing. Okay, Jailer. Rune of Compulsion's Absorb reduced by 33% on normal and heroic difficulties and by 10% on mythic. Rune of Compulsion is a shield that goes up on players that mind controls them, and once you break through that shield by DPSing it, they break out of the mind control. This shield on mythic has 300,000 hit points. It's a lot of damage. So taking 30k off of that is a pretty big deal. You'll be breaking these out much faster, so that is a huge change for that. Misery no longer knocks back on Raid Finder, Normal, and Heroic. Decimator no longer knocks back on Raid Finder, Normal. And Diverted Life Shield no longer heals on Mythic. Well, Diverted Life Shield was an interesting mechanic because it was something that was supposed to heal the Jailer in his final secret phase. And what teams realized in Prague is that for some reason, Mortal Strike abilities worked on this shield. And so it meant that it healed substantially less. That wasn't actually intended. However, the very first time a team encountered this mechanic, they killed the boss with doing this, which again meant that, hey, guess what? We essentially now have to let everyone do it. And so they were just not changing it, allowing everyone to use a Mortal Strike ability to reduce the healing that he received in that phase, which then meant that now they might as well just remove the heal from the game, which is what they did. They just took it out entirely. Didn't make sense to leave it in. It just made, by leaving it in, they just made sure that everyone who killed the boss had to have a Mortal Strike thing in there that they just applied, and that's what they were doing. So you might as well just remove it. So yeah, they removed the heal off Diverted Life Shield. World Crusher produces 2 less bloods on Mythic difficulty, and World Shatter produces 1 less blood on Mythic difficulty. And Phase 4 now triggers at 15% health on Mythic difficulty. All right, so this is the interesting part that we don't know what it's going to look like as far as Mythic Raiders go. The Bloods of Azeroth are how we heal Azeroth, all right? And so in order to actually heal Azeroth, you have to create a chain of players that go from one of the Bloods to Azeroth, and this sort of beam chains through those players, and we actually, on Mythic difficulty, get these swirls that spin out of our characters that, if they impact anyone, does a ton of damage to everyone within like 40 yards. It's pretty ridiculous. So positioning is really crucially important. The World Crusher producing less bloods and the World Shatter producing less bloods, we have to assume means that the other bloods heal Azeroth for more than they previously did. Because if you're just taking bloods away, that doesn't make sense, because then the fight's not killable. So you have to assume that there's another underlying effect to what they're doing with this change, which is you won't have to soak as much, which means there's not as much raid damage, which means positioning isn't as crucial. And this means that those heals are going to be more important to get every single stack of those initial heals, because they're all going to heal for more. So this mechanic of soaking these bloods to heal Azeroth has just gotten a lot more, pressure on it to execute properly, because you have to do it right. Otherwise, if you miss a stack, you're missing substantially more healing, which could cause you to wipe later in the fight. At the same time, it means that the raid damage should be reduced and positioning should be more lax. So this is like a yet to be seen thing for us as people who are 230 something pulls into this boss. This is one of those changes that you see and you go, what does this mean to us? We have to actually see what this is going to play out like. How does this change our strategy? This dance that we've been practicing has just shifted. So we're going to have to wait and see what this actually looks like for us when we get in there tonight. So we'll have to see how it goes. Although Phase 4 triggering at 15% is actually pretty exciting. That's up from 10%. It means that our 31% that we've gotten to, we'll only have to get 15 more inside that sort of like third difficult, challenging phase to be able to get into the last phase, which is actually easier than the third phase. So I'm kind of excited about that, because it means we're probably closer to a kill. So cool. Overall, tons of changes to the raid, really substantial changes to the raid. Again, moving in the right direction, and all things that I would feel much better if we're in on day one, as opposed to now. This is probably the tuning that we should have been seeing initially with this raid. So This is why conversations come up amongst community members of, do they tune raids for world first raiders and then scale things back for everyone else? And this is why these conversations happen, right?
It's kind of clear that they do when you have such a small percentage of even like very high level raiders clearing content before changes. Like, they have obviously been doing at least some stuff internally to try to make the race challenging and interesting. They don't want any more Xavius incidents, but I think it's so misguided. I agree. I think they should make the raids cool and fun. And if Echo and Limit kill it in a reset, that's why they're the best in the world, man. Yeah. You know what I mean? That should be that. Like, this is jarring. And there's some hotfix changes to Raglan that we'll talk about a little bit later on too. Like,
I already went through those ones, but yeah.
No, there's different ones too. They've hit like so many of these things, and I don't know like where. I don't understand like what is their internal tuning like and testing evidencing that these kind of changes are necessary. I'm glad they're making them, but by the same token, it's like I just don't think you can come out at a gate like this and then. I mean, the Jailer fight has been completely gutted on normal difficulty. It doesn't even really resemble the fight that was launched on normal. They've changed so much of it, changed mechanically so much. It's not as good of a training tool for heroic difficulty anymore because too much stuff changes. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm glad they're doing it. I hope they keep doing it. I would really like it if I could live in a world where by the end of this season, Sepulcher Heroic could be like a one-night clear for my team, and we could just go in and knock the bosses over, and people could get what they need or want, and we could move on, because we've done that with every other raid tier basically up until Sanctum of Domination, right? Where like the Sylvanas fight became too much of a potential problem, and it just lasted too long, and there was almost we did it a couple times, but for the most part it was like, okay, well, we had a couple wipes on Fate Scribe or whatever, so we'll pick it up at KT the next night and finish off the last two bosses. Like, I don't know. I want them to really take a step back from this kind of philosophy, and I want like cool raids and stuff, but when you make the tuning and just like the sheer physical size of the raid and the amount of stuff in it to the point where a practice team cannot clear it in like a 2-hour run, that's the way the game worked for like a decade. Yeah. So yeah. I feel like they've gotten a bit too far away from that.
Well, and part of that to me also is putting in so many encounters that last longer than 10 minutes. Sylvanas encounter being initially a 15-minute fight cut down to a 12-minute fight was like any fight to me that goes over 10 minutes is like, that is extreme. Like a 10-minute fight is
a lot. You're asking a lot of players at that point. Yeah.
A 10-minute fight is a long fight. Like that is a long fight to me. That is probably the longest a fight should ever be. Penultimate bosses, ultimate bosses should be 10 minutes long. When you go beyond that, to me, it's like you're asking someone to sit and watch a 3.5-hour movie. That's what you're doing, right? Like, go to the movie theater, go into the theater, sit and watch a 3.5-hour movie. Try not to go to the bathroom. You're like, okay, let's see how this goes. Like, it's. Yeah. Not something people sign up for. The Raglan changes, I did actually move up from the hotfixes area into this. So we covered all the Raglan stuff in that. Okay. The 73% reduced damage over time on Heroic. Yeah, that was one of those big changes that they did. But yeah, I mean, to your point.
That's been live already. So yes. And then there's even more changes with this reset. Yeah. And like Raglan was it was a fight that really tested your throughput, simple mechanically, but you had to do it very specifically or you die. Yeah. And I'm okay with a boss like I think Raglan is an example of like an okay boss for the problems that we're talking about, because what it asks of you is relatively simple, and it's like, can you kill this boss before you die? Yeah. And I think bosses like that usually work out pretty well. It's positioned in kind of a good spot. It's, after Anduin, it's kind of a relief, honestly, in some ways, because it's just the complexity is so much lower. But I mean, these bosses have been touched up so much, man. It's like, and now it could be that because of all the itemization changes and stuff with Shards of Domination going away, with tier sets coming in, with double legendaries coming in, and this huge shift in player power, maybe they just weren't sure where it needed to land. Right. And that could certainly be the case. And I think it's probably always preferable to, err on the side of stuff being tuned too high. Because if it's tuned too low, then the content just has no lifespan and it presents no challenge, and you can't buff it, right? Like, unless something's just straight up malfunctioning, you can't really make a fight harder, right? It's not acceptable. It's just really bad practice. So they kind of have to go in that way, but I do feel like when you see stuff like what we've seen with Halandris, for example, and with Anduin, like they fundamentally are like rewriting the rules of the fight on the fly, and it's jarring, and it's like, in a way it needs to happen, right? Because people need to be able to complete the encounters and kill the bosses and stuff, but it's a shame that it had to come to that, I guess. I mean, yeah, I do feel like I do feel like the heroic jailer hasn't been touched up enough compared to the rest of the raid, so I'm kind of hoping we see some more of that stuff come in before I really start dedicating a ton of pulls to it.
Right.
But, and then, also it's going to be like a big re-clear for a long time. You get a mount for ahead of the curve and all that, and the mount's going to be available in season 4 too. So it's going to be a fight that a lot of people are going to want to kill as they cycle back and through in advance of Dragonflight coming out. So that is a fight that, even though it is the end boss of the expansion, at some point it needs to get to a level where it's like reasonable for a decently practiced pug group to be able to kill. Like, these are things I think about for the next, 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, whatever of the raid's health, is that, we'll need to see this stuff continue to change.
Yeah. And I want to emphasize the one point about that hotfix being separated from the rest of the notes with Ragallon is the point you've been making for a while, that they are just really paying attention to this raid and continuing to put out consistent updates on this raid. So we should expect more changes. We should expect more tuning, and it should be within the next couple of weeks. It shouldn't be a huge period of time. They're probably going to let 9.2.5 settle for like a week and a half, and then we'll probably see a whole other round of changes that come through, because they do want to move people along. They do want this content to be accessible. So I would expect more changes to Jailer and more changes to the rest of this raid as well. Okay, class tuning and PvP adjustments. I only want to cover one major note in this. If you're someone who wants to note to go in and look at specifically the class changes and the PvP changes for your class and spec, check out the notes. 100% all these notes are in our show notes. They're inside the dev notes that they put out for this patch. Things like Arcane Mages getting buffed is something that's in there now. So be sure you're checking that out if you're wanting to see if your class in particular got some tuning or adjustments. Beastmaster Hunters do 4% more damage, just FYI. But the main note I wanted to mention here is all classes now generate more threat when in tank specialization. The dev note for this is, we've heard a lot of feedback about threat loss from the community and our teammates. So apparently it's internal feedback too. Since the start of this season, our design intent is that tanks who are actively directing their damage rotation at an enemy should be able to maintain threat on that enemy. But simple area effect spells like Consecrate or Death and Decay alone should not be sufficient to actually maintain threat on those targets. We've analyzed this situation and feel that a small adjustment to tank threat modifiers should help maintain that balance for the remainder of the expansion. I saw this yesterday. I was doing a hauls yesterday, and our hunter did 55k DPS on an AoE pull and ripped everything off of the tank. There was impossible for our blood DK tank to maintain threat over what this hunter was doing. And if the tank is actively trying to maintain threat on multiple targets, they should be able to maintain threat on multiple targets over someone who's just casting AoE spells. They just should. That's just how this should work. I agree that I think Consecrate on its own or Death and Decay on its own shouldn't just hold threat because it's down on the ground. It shouldn't just be a taunt effect that's dropped on the ground and everything just sticks to you all the time. There should be other buttons you have to press. But whatever the toolkit is, the tank shouldn't be in a situation where the DPS has to stop damage for a period of time to not just get destroyed when a group of mobs get pulled off of the tank and walk over and kill them, when the tank is honestly doing their best. And we're talking about Mythic Raiders who are working on Jailer doing their best to try and hold threat on these mobs. Like, this isn't, someone who might not be pressing their rotation properly or not paying attention or isn't as geared or whatever it is. Like, doesn't make sense that this is possible to happen. So I'm glad they're looking at threat and choosing to tune threat. This will just make tanking more attractive in general. It's one of the most scary things about being a tank, I think, for players who are just coming into the role, is feeling like it's your responsibility to keep these things from attacking other people. And if that is a challenging job to do because you can't hold threat on more than 2 targets at a time kind of thing, then that's a big problem, because these are 5-pack pulls, most of these dungeons in here. So I'm glad they're looking at that. I'm glad they're addressing that. I know all of our melee DPS are very happy about it, because even on Jailer, we have melee DPS who pull threat in the first 15, 20 seconds and just get one shot by a 150k melee attack from Jailer. So yeah, it's great to see them adjusting this problem.
Yeah, now there's a couple things at play here, because one thing they did, I think late in BFA or maybe it was in the 9.0 patch, was they started to kind of tweak the threat knob a little bit. Maybe it was earlier in BFA. I can't remember. It was in the last 2.5 years that they kind of made a fundamental change to threat calculation, and seemingly because they wanted threat to be more of a thing. They wanted to have more pressure on the threat minigame, which, once upon a time in, TBC, all the way up through, I would say, Mists of Pandaria, really, the threat minigame was the tanking minigame. Your job was to get as much threat as you possibly could. Your mitigation was mostly passive. You had some emergency buttons if you had to slam them, but your job was to do as much threat as you possibly could to everything that your group was fighting. And they gave you tools to do that, and to kind of, stuff that would do like bonus threat or whatever, and, bursty kind of threat. And so you had to play that minigame, and that's part of what tanking was. They took that stuff out, and the minigame became about active mitigation, about like using your resources and abilities to protect yourself from damage or to recover from damage that you've taken. And they eased the pressure on the threat minigame. Stuff just started sticking to you. They sort of brought some threat pressure back, but didn't really add in a lot of new tools to generate more threat or have bonus threat or like a way to really game that threat minigame. And now, late in this expansion, with people in their like fully realized gear sets, and people are like unlocking the potential of like Survival Hunter, or Warlock. You have these classes bursting up to 60 plus K DPS on packs, and all I have is a Thunderclap, man. It's not going to keep everything stuck to me. And that is a problem at like high keystone ranks and stuff like that, most specifically, where you have like the most targets that are hard to account for, and people are doing that much damage on stuff that isn't dying for long enough that it can actually like attack them. So I think this is really the only answer. I don't think you can have it both ways. I think you need to the tanking minigame is either the threat minigame or the active mitigation minigame, or maybe something separate that we haven't seen before. But I prefer the active mitigation model. I think just becoming, defensively sound by gearing and talent choices, and then you don't worry about that in combat, was weird. And I was scared of active mitigation when it came out 10 years ago, but it was immediately fun and interactive and cool feeling. So yeah, I'm totally good with them easing off of threat pressure, because we don't have the tools. We don't have the stuff that we need in order to overcome the pressure that the threat represents when a Survival Hunter is just blasting everything and pulling aggro. Like, I have a taunt every 8 seconds. I can maybe stun something and hope it doesn't get to you before I get my next taunt up. But like, there's not counterplay there. So it's, I think this was kind of, I'm glad that they're doing this now. This seems early. This seems like the kind of thing that normally they would have let it get a lot worse before anything changed with it. And so I think they're pretty much on top of this.
Well, sorry, go ahead. You want to say something else?
No, I was going to say the other tuning changes look really good. I mean, big bonuses for Windwalkers and Outlaw Rogues and stuff. So some other cool stuff coming in for sure. But this will take a lot of pressure off of dungeon groups and because you want to be able to cut loose, man. You got all your gear, right? You got your 4-set, you got your double legendaries. We're all powered up. Yeah. We're at the end of this expansion in those terms. You want to be able to cut loose, and it sucks when you start cutting loose and then you die, or you're stressing out your tank and healer, and you can't keep everything grouped up, so now you're not doing as much damage as you should have been doing anyway. Like, all that stuff isn't fun. So yeah, just I don't know. Yeah. I don't want to go the back in my day route. The game isn't like that anymore, and I think it's better for it. So just make stuff stick to the tanks so that everybody can kill it.
Yeah, and I wanted to emphasize one of the other changes that happened in this PvP stuff is they actually buffed the Gladiator's Distinction, which is the stamina trinket that you can use. And they buffed it from 350 stam to 500 stam. And the reasoning behind it was everyone's just starting to outpace this survivability. We had to buff it because people are just more geared, and it's creating a really volatile PvP experience. So we're just going to buff it. And that just speaks to the same thing with threat of like, you know what? Everyone, as you said, is getting their 4-piece. They're getting double Legos. They're getting geared up, and they're just outpacing threat. So it just makes sense to address this now to take care of it. So yeah, glad to see it. Overall, I mean, obviously servers are still down as of us still recording this right now. So we haven't been able to pop in and check anything out yet. But next week, we will be chatting about our experiences in the patch and any new changes or new secrets or surprises or tips that we have about it. So be sure you're checking out that. But we're going to play a quick sounder for our patrons, and we'll be right back. Hi, everyone. I'd like to take a moment to thank our patrons. They contribute a ton to our show and help us to improve on the content we create. Today I'm giving a special shout out to Arajian, Celian, Infark, Kapawi, Mibble the Mighty, Nick, and Shorel. Thank you. This sounder is for you. Our Patreon is live over at patreon.com/thestartingzone. You can check it out there. Thank you to our newest patron, DK Bladen. Thank you very much. I hope you are a Death Knight. That'd be cool if that was your name that you use for Patreon.
I assume so.
Yeah.
It would be, It would be a little, I don't know. That's what everybody's going to think, right?
It could be like Deke Kenneth Bladen. We don't know. Mm-hmm. That could be his name. Who knows?
That could be. Yeah. That could be. Yeah. But you know, everybody's just going to think, I guess if that is your name, then you have to play DK.
It's true. It's true. Thank you so much for basically helping out our show, for supporting our show. We appreciate it very much. All of our patrons, we appreciate you. We don't have any planned date for the June events yet, but expect those to be coming up later this month, and we'll get all your questions and everything submitted. So if you have a question, if you thought of something, if you ran a dungeon this week, or you're checking out something new in 9.2.5, write it down if you have a question, or post it in our Discord, and be sure that, you know, we start keeping track of them now, because there's always that, like, by the time the show comes around, you're like, oh, I had like 3 good questions and I don't remember what they were now. So be sure you just, you know, post it in there. We'll take note of it. We'll keep track of it, and we'll get it in for the show that we do later in the month. So thank you so much to all of our patrons, and looking forward to chatting with you later in the month.
Yep. Thanks for the support of the show. It's been a really long time we've been doing this and running the Patreon, and the support really makes a difference for us being able to, you know, keep the show consistent and do bonus episodes and do all the stuff that we want to do with it. So thank you all for helping us out with it, and welcome aboard, DK. And like you said, if stuff occurs to people while they're checking out 925 and stuff, you know, send it in. We'll bookmark it. We'll make sure it gets in the next patron episode.
Yeah. And if you folks have enjoyed this episode of The Starting Zone, consider heading over onto your iTunes, your Apple Podcasts, and leaving us those 5 stars. They really help out our show, and we love hearing from our listeners. This one actually comes in from Germany, from Mike FHXF, entitled Greetings from Germany. It says, thank you very much for your podcast. Really like to listen to it at work. Stay healthy, and wish you all the best. Thank you so much, Mike. That's great. You taking the time to leave us a review. We really appreciate it. And it's always cool to hear from our international listeners. So thank you so much. And, you know, greetings, Germany from Canada.
Yeah, last week we had a review from Australia. We got Germany this week. We're going on a world tour this summer. So thanks for checking in. Great to hear from you, and glad you like the show, and we could help you pass the workday by a little bit better. And appreciate it. And it's always great to hear from the international audience. It's always just kind of mind-boggling to think about us, you know, sitting in our houses having this conversation, and then people all over the world checking it out.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. All right, that's going to wrap up episode 522 of The Starting Zone. If you want to check out show notes for this episode or leave us a comment on the show, you can head on over to thestartingzone.com, the official website for the Starting Zone podcast. If you want to contact the show and leave us your feedback or ask a question, you can email us at thestartingzone@gmail.com, or reach out to us on Twitter. Or if you're trying to find that Discord I mentioned a bunch of times, it's just thestartingzone.com/Discord. You click on that link, it'll take you to our Discord, and you can join up and chat with us over there. And if you want to get your hands on some TSE gear, that's over at TeePublic. That's teepublic.com/stores/thestartingzone. All these sweet designs you can get on shirts and mugs and stickers and all that kind of fun stuff. And Jason, where can folks find you on the internet?
The best place to find me, as always, is over on Twitter. You can find me over there at Shieldwald, always talking WoW and whatever else I'm getting into. And you can find me streaming WoW on twitch.tv/Shieldwald, Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Sundays, 7:30 Eastern, doing raids and Keystone Dungeons and stuff. And yeah, I think we got a full schedule this week, probably. No nights off this week. So I'll be back at it. So come check it out.
Yeah. And if you're trying to find me, you can find me on Twitter at Spencer_Downey or over on Twitch at twitch.tv/SpencerHD. I've been streaming all of our prog for the last few bosses, and I think we're going into night 8, I think, of the Jailer tonight now. So this will be big prog, hopefully seeing the last secret phase either tonight or tomorrow, and maybe even getting a kill later in the week. So it'll be an exciting week to tune in over there if you're wanting to check some stuff out. And if you want to reach out and hang out and chat, that's twitch.tv/SpencerHD. All right. For Jason and myself, we want to say thanks for listening, and jobs done.